Hey folks, so we have, of course, another big roster announcement, so that means that you get another video, and in this one we are talking about Vitality adding ropz to their lineup in place of Spinks. Now, of course, we have been hearing rumblings about this move for quite some time. It's one of the, more unkept secrets, I guess you could say, out in the community as far as roster moves go. Maybe only second to the fact that we knew that Nico was calling the Falcons for quite some time. And really, I think the bigger part of it, though, was we knew more about Spinks leaving the team for an even longer amount of time. That has been floating around out there for a while. There was, talk that he was potentially trying to leave the team earlier in the year, and that didn't really work out, so he remained on the starting lineup. And it becomes like a situation where, according to Spinks, he decided he wanted to leave the team. He wasn't being asked to leave, but there was also, kind of talks about how there was definitely some maybe inter-team turmoil with Spinks and maybe another team member or something like that. You had interviews coming out where, I think Apex said something about, it's hard to do well and it doesn't feel like you're on a real team, or he might have put that like on an Instagram post. I can't really remember which, but the point is that there was some type of issue internally with this squad. Yet, despite that, Vitality remained consistently one of the best teams in the world throughout pretty much the entire 2024 season, through both the majors and through really everything, So what I want to do with this video is just kind of talk about this move, talk about Vitality in general, and kind of talk about what it's going to look like for Vitality going forward. Because for me, my kind of summary of Vitality's 2024 is that they were one of the most consistent teams in the world, yet they didn't win nearly as much as they probably should have. You look at some of the teams out there, like Na'Vi, like Spirit, they won multiple titles. I think they won 4 titles each, and each one of them won a major as well. G2 had a couple of titles with their lineup that they only had for like 6 months, and they even had a title whenever they were using Stewie 2K as a stand-in, and Nico was their IGL, right? So I think they had 3 titles total with the core of their team. And then, I think, FaZe obviously had their win at Chengdu. I can't remember if there was another win or not, but, they had their title. mousesports had, a couple of titles, I think, under their belt as well. But Vitality only won one event the entire 2024 season. And of course, that was IEM Cologne. Arguably the most prestigious tournament outside of the 2 majors. So that's a big one to have. But just when you think about how talented their lineup was, how good they looked tactically, how good their map pool was, just all these things that were going for them, it was always shocking to me that they only hoisted 1 trophy in 2024. So to kind of run through, Vitality coming into this move, you had them placing top 4 at the Copenhagen Major, losing the FaZe in the semifinals. They came second at EPL Season 19, losing to mousesports in the grand finals of that one. They came second at Dallas, using the G2, using Stewie 2K as a stand-in, and Nico IGLing. So that was kind of damning. That's where you felt like they really had a vulnerable target out there they should be able to beat to win a title. But they couldn't get it done. Then the Blast Spring finals, they go top 4. They lose to Spirit in the semifinals. And then won't really talk about Esports World Cup. That was a weird format. They win Cologne. Again, that's the one where they beat everyone. They were able to beat FaZe, beat mousesports, beat Na'Vi in a best of 5 to ultimately win that title. So pretty solid. And then they placed top 8 at EPL Season 20, losing to Eternal Fire in the quarterfinals. And that one was probably their worst result of the entire year, because they were pretty much top 4 or better every other event outside of that one, if you're not including the Esports World Cup, which again was just kind of a weird format. So that one stung a little bit, but the Blast Fall final, they placed top 4 yet again, lose to G2 in the semis. Rio, they go 5th, 6th, losing to mousesports in that situation. And then at the Blast World final, that's when they had Jack standing in for Mezzi, but still managed to place top 4, beating mousesports and Team Liquid, but ultimately losing to G2 yet again in a best of 3 there. And then at the Perfect World Shanghai Major, they ran through the EU RMR with no problems, 3-0, beating Gamer Legion and BetBoom in best of 1s, and then 2-0ing FaZe. They went directly to the elimination stage, where they 3-0'd yet again, beating Gamer Legion, Furia, and Made in Brazil. Again, not dropping a map at all at any point in time throughout the European RMR or the elimination stage of the majors. So looking like the tournament favorite, especially when Na'Vi got knocked out by Heroic prior to the playoffs. Yet, they were one of the victims of FaZe's miracle run, which kind of comes full circle with now ropz joining their team, as ropz did pop off against them big time, as well as Brokey having a huge resurgence in that series, and just FaZe went on the miracle run and wound up beating them in a 3-map series. Opening map goes to Vitality on Nuke, but then FaZe beats them on Mirage and Anubis, 2 really good maps, honestly, for Vitality, and ultimately, therefore, knocks them out of the major with another top 8 finish then. So again, Vitality, I would say outside of Na'Vi going on that 6 straight finals run that they had, kind of after the major and after a couple of flop events directly after the major, this was the most consistent team in my opinion of the year. Like, again, they were pretty much placing top 5 or better in every tournament they played outside of the top 8 finish at EPL Season 20, the top 8 finish at the Shanghai Major, and then, I mean, technically you can throw the Esports World Cup in there as well. But other than that, it was top 5 or better. And, they were always ranked within the top 5 for the entire year. They were often top 3. There was even maybe some brief periods where you consider them ranked number 1 right after the Cologne win. And obviously they were a super damn good squad. It's just for whatever reason, they couldn't get the titles all the time. It was FaZe knocked them out of the tournament one time. Mouse Sports knocked them out of a couple of tournaments. Spirit knocked them out of one. G2 knocked them out of one. It wasn't like they had one particular kryptonite. I would say G2 would probably be the closest thing, as it seemed like G2 did beat them pretty much in the majority of the best of 3s that they played against each other. Like if you look at, them getting knocked out of Dallas, that was G2 that they had beaten G2 earlier in the tournament. Again, they beat G2 at the Blast Spring Finals, but then G2 was a team that, later on knocked them out of the Blast Fall Final. So there was a little bit of kind of exchanging series with G2. So it wasn't like they had some particular kryptonite, like Team Liquid had FaZe, for example, they could never beat them. Or the whole, thing where G2 had a crazy advantage over Spirit until they didn't even have to cross paths at the end of the day in the Shanghai Grand Final because FaZe pulled the upset in the semis over G2. So it's something like that. But again, they just, for whatever reason, they just weren't getting it done. I don't know why, honestly, because again, they had loads of talent. For one, you have Ziwu, who is, the top 3 player in the world. Some people have him number 2, some people have him number 3. Incredible opper, obviously, but also a fantastic hybrid who could pick up the AK on T sides and have tons of impact. While he didn't have a crazy opening attempt rate on the T side like a true entry fragger would, he was always in that kind of low to mid 20% range, which is still pretty high for the T side. And he had a crazy high success rate, well over 50%. Also had a high opening attempt rate on the CT side, and again, a super huge success rate in the high 60% range. And we all know how good Ziwu is. He's been a superstar for several years now. So you had that guy. That was one of your big pieces, right? Then you have Flames, who is a fantastic entry fragger. I mean, this guy was in the high 20% to low 30% opening attempt range on the T side, so definitely did a lot of their opening duels and had usually a high 40% success rate. That's pretty damn good. I mean, yeah, he wasn't crossing the 50% threshold like a Donk or a Xantares or a Nalij or something along those lines, so maybe you would rate some of those guys a little bit higher in their entry power, but Flames is right up there, certainly amongst the top entries in the world. And even if you get away from just the pure entry stats I was kind of referring to and just look at his overall numbers, how successful he was as an anchor on the CT side for them, this dude was definitely a star player. There's no doubt about it. He was probably their second or third best player. It kind of depends on how you want to go, because I think you could argue Spinks was their second best player. Of course, he was kind of a flex rifler, extremity player, played a lot of rotating positions on the CT side. While at certain points in the year, he was certainly a lot more passive. He was only taking maybe, 12 or 13% of their opening attempts on the T side. By the end of the year, he was kind of up to 18%. So you actually, over the last 3 months, had a slightly higher willingness to be a little bit more aggressive and go for a little bit more opening duels on the T side. And he had a very high success rate. He was over 50%. He never hit the same level of playmaking on the extremities, in my opinion, as a JL or a Bit, or some of these guys who were like hitting the mid 20% opening attempt range, but he was a guy that was getting a little bit more active as the year went on, maybe playing a little bit more freely and a little bit more loose as he knew that it was going to be curtains on his time at Vitality soon. So either way, throughout the year, that Ziwu Flame Spinks trio was really packing a punch. It was one of the best trios in Counter-Strike. Really, I think the only other one that you could put out there that was better would probably be G2's when they had Bunasim Alves and Nico. I mean, that was the big death ball. Like there was really nothing that was outscoring that. I mean, Donk could certainly just be amazing by himself. And, obviously Na'Vi, when JL and Bit were on and Ema was in form, they had a solid distribution of talent as well, that they never really had a true superstar probably in a lot of people's eyes. But no, I do think that Vitality, that trio of players I just mentioned, what was fantastic, and the roles balanced out quite well. It was a star opper, a star entry, and a star flex rifler. Like, you really can't ask for too much better than that as far as kind of getting what you want out of a team's composition. And then you had Apex, who was a veteran in-game leader at this point. He was also a guy who would, be willing to sacrifice himself and be an entry type IGL. And at times he would have a high success rate. At times he would have pop-off moments. Now, you wouldn't count on that by any stretch of the imagination, and his overall average was comparable to most IGLs. You wouldn't put him in the same fragging IGL category as someone like a Blitz or a Big Uzera, or what Twist is trying to be for Liquid, or something along those lines, but he definitely was pretty solid in my opinion. Better than some others. Let's put it that way, right? And then Mezzy, look, I think, he was a great support extremity player, and, did a lot of anchoring in his own right, playing some of the spots that no one else wants to play. And I really felt like, particularly the second half of the year, he really picked it up and became a strong performer. And so I'm kind of glad to see that he actually stays on this team. Like, I'm glad to not see him get replaced. Now, I will say, like, in an ideal world, if nothing goes wrong with Spinks and for whatever reason that relationship never fractures and Spinks wants to stay on the team, yes, I do think there is a world where you could have replaced Mezzy with ropz, and this would have been like a fucking all-star team at that point, because ropz does actually technically play a lot of Mezzy's positions on the T side, as we'll talk about a little bit later. So there's going to have to be a little bit of give and take on the roles, I guess you could say, going forward, though I'm not going to go super role sell on it, because at the end of the day, there are both flex rifle extremity players. I just think the difference is that, ropz is more of a, anchor player on the CT side, where Spinks was more of a rotator player. So I do think that, again, you would have had an all-star team if you could have kept Spinks on Vitality and you would have had ropz come in for Mezzy. I'm just saying. Like, I'm not saying that Mezzy should be kicked or deserves to be or whatever the case may be. I'm just saying, like, in a fantasy world, that would have been a crazy 5. You folks out there can't deny that. Come on. But anyway, yeah, I think Mezzy staying on the team is fine. I think in his own right, he has been a valuable asset. And, I think Vitality have a great map pool going for them as a core. Obviously, Vertigo is a big map for them, and now that's gone, so that's a little bit unfortunate. But they were a fantastic team on Nuke and Mirage. They were pretty solid on Inferno. Their DusT 2 was also fantastic. And their Anubis, I'll say that did slow down for them. I think that's like probably their biggest vulnerability outside of the fact that they permaban Ancient. And then we'll have to see how they implement Train to their map pool. But for sure, massive on DusT 2, massive on Mirage, massive on Nuke. So those are 3 huge maps that they definitely can play to a very high level. Their Inferno was pretty solid, just not as strong as the other 3 that I named. And they can play Anubis, but it did weaken a little bit. Like I think they won like 8 of their first 10 games in the year, and then they went 4-6 in their last 10 games of the year. So a little bit of a slowdown, but still very capable of playing it. And also just played solid Counter-Strike. I mean, they had a great mixture of having multiple different types of default openings they could go to, and a lot of different mid rounds that they could run, from these openers, but they could also mix in, the fast-paced play, or on a map like DusT 2, they could play the standard meta very well. And then on a map like Mirage, they had one of the deepest playbooks on Mirage I saw all year. Like, I actually did a video, if you want to check it out on the channel. I can't remember. I think it was like Vitality, the Menace of Mirage. And I really broke down, all these different openings and conditionings that they could do and fakes that they could throw. Like, they had, I think the only team that has deep of a playbook as Vitality on Mirage was like maybe Mousesports and maybe Na'Vi. That's probably the only other 2 teams I would say are even comparable to just the amount. They had like 6 or 7 different openings they could run on that map. And then they had all the mid rounds that they could flex to. They had the set pieces they could mix in. They had the pacing changes they could mix in. Like, this team was just incredible. And I think a lot of it was, Apex obviously doing a great job as an IGL, the coaching doing a great job helping build their playbook, Zywoo just being this incredibly flexible player who was a primary opper, particularly on the CT side, but on T sides could rifle and was extremely mobile. And again, you had this perfect balance of talent between the roles, between the Spinks, Flames Ziwu trio. I mean, it was just so distributed very well. And, some of these guys were very good at making decisions on their own so that they could have an X factor. And yeah, I mean, this team, again, I'm singing all their praises because I think they were the most consistent teams in the world. I think for me, they were a top 3 team for the bulk of the year. It's just surprising they didn't win more trophies. And I don't know if part of that was because just, in the nitty gritty and some of those 3 map series they played that they got knocked out in a semifinal or a final or a quarterfinal. Things just went a little bit array, a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if it was partially because of the inter-team dynamics that were going on, or if it's just little micro things they couldn't fix. But I think the overall macro of this team was fantastic. And so, yeah, we kind of talked about all this, but what they're losing is a great player. I mean, Spinks was an active extremity player who became more and more active throughout the course of the year. He was definitely, I think, on average, they're more playmaking extremity player compared to Mezzi, who was more of a true support player. And he was huge for them on the CT side as a rotator, and was probably their second best player after Ziwu, or third behind Flames, however you want to put it. I think it depends on what you value more and, who you think had the most overall impact because of their role or whatever you want to do. But Spinks is an absolute stud, and wherever Spinks winds up, he's going to make that team better than what they are now. It's a big loss for Vitality, honestly. Again, in an ideal world, you have Spinks and you have ropz, and you have the most powerful extremity players you could hope for on top of having Ziwu and Flames. It's just you're cooking with gas at that point. But that's not to be, right? And so it's going to be interesting because ropz, for my money, was the most consistent player on FaZe in 2024. Even though Brokey had some incredible highs, I felt like in the mid and second half of the year, he had his struggles and really even struggled in Shanghai up until the playoffs. I think Frozen would probably be right next to ropz as far as consistency goes. And then Rain, honestly, was kind of average for the bulk of the year, or slightly above average, but then had that crazy run in Shanghai in his own right, just as a massive entry fragger, just making big plays all the time. But yeah, it is worth noting that ropz was super strong early in the year when, FaZe were having their success. Again, I kind of talked about this. If you go watch my, Elige going to FaZe video, I kind of highlighted a little bit about FaZe and what ropz is doing for them there, if you want a little bit more detail. But yeah, it is true that kind of in the middle of the year, he wasn't as much of a star as he was at the beginning. And certainly at Shanghai, he was bonkers. He was a potential MVP candidate if FaZe would have won the thing. He may have been able to leap donk for that, depending on how that grand final, if it would have went differently, if that DusT 2 goes into overtime and they actually win the whole damn thing. You'd have to have a debate a little bit about who was the MVP of the tournament, because ropz was just out of his mind. He was playing his anchor positions exceptionally. He was becoming more of a playmaker in the solo roles as opposed to being more passive like he kind of was throughout the middle of the year. He was going for more openers. He was more dynamic. He was providing so much value to FaZe. And if he can keep that level, and also that willingness to be a playmaker, because again, Spinks was kind of trending in that direction, in my opinion, throughout the course of the year, then I think on T sides, ropz will be able to fill Spinks' shoes as an extremity player who is a little bit more proactive. It's just going to be a little bit shaky on the CT side. And really that's because ropz on Ancient, it doesn't matter because Vato doesn't play Ancient, so I'm just going to kind of leave that one alone. But on Anubis, he was their A-Lurk, which is the spot that Mezzi plays. On DusT 2, he played B Tunnels, which is the spot that Spinks played, so that is basically going to be a 1-for-1. So they won't really have to change much on DusT 2 to implement ropz, in my opinion. On Inferno, he was their Apartments player on FaZe, which is the spot that Spinks played as well. So that should basically be a 1-for-1 also. So DusT 2 and Inferno, things are going to be all right. But if you look at Mirage and Anubis, he would be conflicting with Mezzi on what spots they play. Now, Mezzi seems like the kind of guy who's probably willing to, go with the flow and do whatever the team needs. And maybe there's also a little bit of give and take on ropz being willing to take up some of Spinks' roles more directly. So, maybe he would be willing to play, on Mirage a different position or something like that. Maybe he'd be willing to be more of that kind of Nertz player, playing underpass and attacking connector and kind of doing some different stuff while Mezzi plays outside the A-bomb site. We'll just have to kind of see how that works. I mean, considering how many different openings Vitality had on Mirage, it's not like they played default very often anyway, so it may not even really matter in the grand scheme of things on the T side of that map. And I'll just kind of leave it at that, because again, Ancient doesn't matter Vertigo's now out the map pool. We don't really know anything about terrain, so I can't really talk about any other maps. CT side's going to be a little bit more tough because, you know, it's one of those things where ropz was kind of an anchor, but did also play a couple of star CT positions. So on Anubis, for example, he was an A anchor. That's Flames' spot. So gonna have to kind of figure that out. Where Spinks was, you know, that B con player. So ropz could play that position, I think, just fine, because he plays A con on Mirage, for example. So I think he could play that spot. It shouldn't be an issue, but I'm just saying, technically speaking, he is an A anchor and so is Flame. So they're going to have to figure that out on Anubis. On DusT 2, he was a B anchor. That is Mezzy's spot, but Spinks was the B rotator. So maybe ropz can just be the B rotator, still assist Mezzy at B, but not be the true B anchor. You know, we'll have to see how that goes. On Inferno, he was the A anchor. Again, this is Mezzy's position, but Spinks was the A rotator. So, once again, maybe there could be a little bit of give and take there where Mezzy continues to be the A anchor, but ropz still plays on the A side of the map, where there's still some familiarity there as opposed to playing Banana, which is a much different type of thing. And then on Mirage, ropz was an A connector player, which is kind of that star position. But some teams treat it as a position where they want to put their IGL there to be in a more central spot, to have kind of more of a lay of the land. And that's the philosophy Vitality chose by having Apex playing A connector. I personally think Apex should give that up and let ropz play A connector. But, you know, Spinks was in a spot that maybe ropz would be just willing to play. I don't really know. You know, it just kind of depends, because Flames was their A anchor for the most part on Mirage, and then you had Mezzy being the B anchor and Spinks was a B rotator. So maybe ropz would be willing to be the B rotator. I don't really know. And they'll let Apex continue to play A connector, or maybe they'll switch it up. Maybe, you know, Apex will allow ropz to keep his spot, and maybe he'll play the B rotator role. It'll still keep him in a more proactive position as opposed to being an anchor role, and still basically. I'm hoping that they're just going to be able to kind of find a way to blend it all. You know, again, I don't want to be one of those role cells that makes it super strict, but, you know, I do think there is something to be said about, you know, how good of a player ropz is, to kind of respect that. And if Apex and Mezzy have to kind of make way to facilitate that a little bit, I think you probably should, as the more supportive elements of the team. But again, there's also the potential for ropz. I've seen his flexibility throughout his career. I think he could probably take some spots for Spinks and it would be fine. Again, he already is kind of a 1-for-1 for Spinks on DusT 2 and Inferno anyway, just to give an example. So all in all, look, again, in a dream world, you get ropz and Spinks on this team with ZywOo and Flames and Apex, and you're cooking. But considering some of the dynamics and issues that the team was having internally, and Spinks has to now depart because of that, that makes perfect sense. If you needed a replacement for Spinks, ropz is a pretty damn good one to pick up, so this is an A+ move for Vitality, in my opinion. I think a move like this keeps Vitality in contention to be a consistent top 5 team still. I think it gives them the potential to be top 3. I think it gives them potential to contend for titles. You know, there's obviously some other really strong teams out there. You know, Spirit has kept their full 5, and they just come off the back of winning a major. Mouse Sports has kept their 5, and they're still a consistent top 5 team in the world. I think that, you know, even though G2 lost Nico, they still have a lot of incredible talent and will still be a threat, no doubt, to win trophies. And I do think that this new Falcons team, with the heroic core and Nico, they're going to be dangerous. Na'Vi, you know, yeah, they had their struggles at the end of the year. Not making the major playoffs is a big slap against them, I think, and how the Blast World final went before the major was also a big hit to them. But I still think that they have a really damn good team, and they're still going to be contending as well. And I think FaZe with the Liege definitely could be huge. I think Mongols is still going to be a factor as well. And maybe Liquid with Nerds is going to be interesting. So the way things are shaping up, like, we're going to have a really cool start to 2025 at these first events. Like, there's a lot of teams out there that could contend, in my opinion. And I think that this was a great move for Vitality considering the circumstances. And that's really all I have to say about it without getting redundant. So hope you folks enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, comment down below. What are your thoughts about this move? And yeah, we're seeing the channel grow actually quite a bit lately, so I really appreciate that. Hope we can kind of keep it up, as this is kind of like the one outlet I can guarantee that I can get my analysis and voice out there. And yeah, I just really appreciate you tuning in. Hope to catch you on the next one.